Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. My name's Marie Morris. Thanks for inviting me to present on our CFO task force. I'm also looking forward to interview our guest today. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. But before we do so, I hope you're sitting comfortably. I'm sorry I can't be here in person, but hopefully next year will be a different setup. Um, you might have heard about the CFO task force for the SDG that was set up a year ago, but I wanted to kind of share a little bit more background before I introduce our first Asian company who just joined the task force, and I hope it will be followed by many others. So let me share my screen. I'm going to do that hopefully very seamlessly. Here we go. So a little bit of an introduction, a few slides for you to bring home, and then we'll go into the actual interview. So what I wanted to cover today is a bit of an introduction, tell you more about the task force, as well as the principles that we've just launched on integrated SDG investments for CFOs, so designed and co-developed by CFOs for CFOs, and then touch on the partnerships that we've established as well as part of the task force. Some of the names that I'm sure will be familiar to you. So this is really to set up the scene. We are, sort of part of Go ESG Asian today. I think you've had a whole day already yesterday and a full day today. So obviously, the topic is very prominent in Asia and all around the world, and it's linking really the financing gap to reach the 2030 agenda, and finding ways to mainstream those investments. So the gap itself has been estimated to 3 to 5 trillion annually dollars just in developing countries alone. So we're looking at this big investment gap in terms of achieving the SDGs by 2030. So in 9 years' time. So we don't have that much time left. The way we position this is very much as an investment opportunity for corporates to contribute towards the SDGs. The good news is that we think that this gap obviously is big, is large, but it's not impossible to fill it in, especially if we're able to gather CFOs and their investments around this. So that was just the intro. The Global Compact, of which my colleague Farouz, the executive director, and others, I'm sure you're familiar with the team. So I work in the headquarters office, and we've been working on sustainable finance for 2 to 3 years. And so prior to the task force, we've issued some guidance around corporate finance as a catalyst for sustainable growth, really looking at how this can be triggering the actual financing gap that we've just looked at. We've also been issuing guidance, and I think some of you will be familiar with this, around some of the instruments that can be used to fill in that gap. So talking about foreign direct investments, SDG bonds. So an example of that is one of our companies that we work with closely called NL, power generation companies based in Italy, but operating globally, has issued a general purpose SDG linked bond recently. And I'm sure you'll have seen on the market a myriad of other sustainability bonds coming out. So this is really what we're looking at encouraging with this initiative. More bonds, more instruments on the market. So the task force was launched a year ago, as I said, with about 30 companies that were in the room at the time. And all of them, were mostly CEOs. So we didn't have the CFOs connections yet at the time. It's important to kind of highlight that this is very much mandated by the UN itself as the compact. Obviously, we're one of the agencies that is part of the broader UN family, broader UN ecosystem. So, but we have a direct sort of mandate from the DSG and the SG to really kind of establish the private sector at the table around financing for the SDGs. So that was a year ago. And this year, just to kind of highlight that since that kind of small group of companies that came together, we've been joined by, that's not actually completely updated because we've just had, as I said, our first Asian company, MRCB, joining, plus a few others. But we'll update that shortly. But as for September this year, there were 34 CFOs, so who've actually joined us as founding members, representing a collective market cap of $1.1 trillion. So it's substantial, and we're looking at growing. We are growing as we're speaking, cross-sector and cross-geography. So really a group of like-minded CFOs and some investors, credit rating agencies as well. So where are we with this task force? So we've set it up for the next 2 years. Obviously, I expect it to kind of continue growing, but let's just see how we go in a year time. But for now, we are going to be focusing, as I said, on obviously growing and also having a sectoral approach. So sort of what does SDGs actually mean for let's say transport sector or the finance sector and so on. So that's going to be the focus. And the last 9 months have been focusing on setting up the stage and developing that set of principles. A few examples, obviously, just don't want to necessarily repeat myself or go too much in details, but just to highlight that this is a truly global initiative. So, we were lucky, and I'm sure some of you were perhaps attending that, but we hosted in partnership with our Malaysian colleagues a CFO roundtable a couple of months ago. We've also sort of replicated that elsewhere in the US, of course in Europe, in South America, in Africa. So we're very much looking at a kind of global representation at sort of the initiative level. And before I interview Jit, and so we can actually tell you all and more about what it actually means practically for companies, I wanted to kind of touch on two more things. One is the principles that we launched. So that's the launch back this September, which was picked up by the Wall Street Journal in sort of a great article that really I think capture the linkages between sustainability and CFOs and their teams, and how important it is for them to be at the table more and more with the increased sort of stewardship that they have in terms of channeling investments. So this is the set of principles that was launched. It's called the CFO Principles on Integrated SDG Investment and Finance. It was a 9 months sort of piece of work, co-developing this with our colleagues from the various members that we're lucky to have. And really what this is about is a set of 4 principles looking at across the role of the CFOs, what are the key areas that they can influence. So I'll sort of switch to the next slide to show you those principles. And of course, it's all available for free on our website. So if you are a CFO, or even if you are part of the sustainability team of a corporate and you want to kind of have a think about what does it look like, it's all available for you. And those areas that I've just mentioned are touching on the impact thesis and the actual strategy. So how do you actually align the company, your corporate with the SDGs? It touches on the principle 3, which is sort of what financial instruments actually are available to create that SDG linked finance. So from mainstream instruments like bonds and loans and so on, how can CFO or their teams apply an SDG lens to them? And then the fourth part is around communicating and reporting. So we understand that not everyone is necessarily yet at that level of a journey, and we very much value having different companies from different sectors at the table. But this really provides a common language for CFOs to talk about corporate finance and SDGs in particular. And just to come back quickly on this one, obviously, besides joining us and signing the principles as a result, we also encourage companies to setting ambitious targets. It's not something that we're going to go and police or check, or that is legally binding in any way. It's really kind of to to create that kind of ambition, internally for CFOs to drive this change over years. We understand it doesn't come over time. It doesn't come over, like one day. It's obviously a long process, but we really want to be there to guide companies through that process. That's all I'm going to touch on. Just one last slide, because I did say I would, which is around the partnerships that we've developed. So some of you might be familiar with the Principle for Responsible Investment, which is our sister organization working with investors to really kind of drive those topics as well. So PRI is one. Also wanted to mention UNEPFI, so our other sister organization working mostly with banks and insurance companies, and a wide range of other initiatives. And I think that's really important that we're connecting to those, mostly because we don't want to duplicate what's already been done, but also we want to focus on primarily, the innovation within the corporate finance function of a corporate. So this is what this is our unique selling point, if you like, from a compact perspective. That's really it. So thanks so much. This is the team, my team, who sort of works really hard to make this happen. So obviously, just want to kind of give credit to them for being active and helping me, sort of day to day create this new space for CFOs. So if you have any questions, you can contact any of us, and of course, I'm available for questions. Not online, sadly, but definitely on email. So thanks, everyone. Hopefully that gives you a good introduction on the CFO Task Force and our plans for the next 2 years. And I hope to welcome many of you to the Task Force. But for now, I wanted to make a special welcome to our first Asian corporates joining the CFO Task Force or the SDG. Amajit China, Chief Corporate Officer at MRCB. So join me in welcoming Amajit, and I'm looking forward to hearing about what MRCB does in this space and how we can work together going forward. So welcome. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned. Well, welcome. Very happy to have you today for a special interview. I know I wish we were meeting in person, but have to do it that way for now. So we're delighted to welcome you at the UN Global Compact and at this conference, Go ESG Asian. Jit, I'd like to kind of maybe give you a bit of an introduction and ask a bit more about what you do, what's your role. So if you can just maybe tell us that before we start, a few questions to.
Sure, Marie. Sure. Thank you so much, Marie. I'm delighted to be with you. My name is Amajit China. I'm the Chief Corporate Officer of Malaysian Resources Corporation, which is a public listed company. We've been listed for about since the 70s, actually, in Malaysia.
Wow.
We're quite a long time, and we're a large property developer and a construction company. We pioneered transit-oriented developments in Malaysia, and we're known for that in Malaysia. We have a big flagship development in the middle of Kuala Lumpur, which integrates 9 different railway networks through the development. So it's really we're really specialized in integrating property developments with mass transportation infrastructure. And the other thing we do is we're a construction company, also quite heavily focused on the transportation, in the transportation space. We're probably one of the larger, if not the largest, transportation infrastructure developers in Malaysia. So we've built a lot of railway infrastructure. We're currently building a 36-kilometer light rail transit system in Greater Kuala Lumpur. And we have built many roads, highways, toll roads, etc. Over the years and decades.
Wow, so that's a heavy kind of infrastructure and long-term project. And I guess, putting that into perspective, looking at the various risks as well that companies are facing, I'd love to hear a bit more about, and I guess that's part of the reason why you're joining the Compact and the CFO task force. We're delighted to have you on board. What do you think are the levers that are available for economic players and companies such as yourselves to contribute to the Agenda 2030? So bring the opportunity side to those challenges.
I mean, there are a lot of challenges. Obviously, notwithstanding what's happening at the moment with the pandemic and everything as a result of that. I'm not sure how whether it's the same elsewhere, but in our region and in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, and in Malaysia, I think a lot of the things that we're looking at in a sustainability perspective is and Agenda 2030 is still very much in a nascent stage. I think I think the regulators are trying very hard and actually doing very good jobs. The Securities Commission in Malaysia and Bursa Malaysia are really trying to promote and highlight the importance of sustainability to Malaysian listed companies in particular. I think the central bank is also very active in this area as well. It set up a joint committee on climate change, which I think is designed to ensure that the companies that receive financing in the future increasingly are looking at climate change and sustainability and are proactive and are taking steps to mitigate climate change, for example, and making sure that their businesses are sustainable. And I think that's going to be very important. It's very important for us as a business. One of the key inputs that we require is capital. We do have a strong balance sheet, but nevertheless, without capital, we can't build out our projects. We have a GDV stretching out over the next 15, 20 years of about $8 billion US. We have a construction order book of just under $5 billion US. So the availability of finance is critical to our business. And so at the board level, for example, one of the key enterprise risks for the organization is climate change and ESG, because we envisage in the future that there will come a time when there will be if you're not adhering to the SDGs and reporting properly and demonstrating that you are not contributing to climate change, then you're going to have a problem getting finance, and that's it, really. I mean, without that, we don't have a business. It's as simple as that. Sorry, Mary.
No, carry on. Sorry, because I remember when we first met and discussing sort of how we could get MRCB as the first Asian companies on the CFO task force. You mentioned, and I think you're just touching on that, but the role of the banks as well in that sort of unlocking access to capital, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing, I do think this is going to become critical. I don't think people have really understood the ramifications of what's happening, but I think increasingly they will. I think the momentum is growing. And as I said, the regulators are doing a great job at educating not just listed companies, but others as well, about what's on the horizon. So I think this momentum will increase. I think the other thing, and a personal pet peeve, I guess, is in our region, I don't think institutional investors are really addressing sustainability as aggressively as they should do. I'm not sure how aggressive it is elsewhere in Europe and the US, but I think more needs to be done. It's not something that's really, I mean, there's a lot of lip service being paid to this area, but I don't see it with my engagements with fund managers and institutional investors, any real, I don't see it integrated or embedded in their investment philosophy. As I said, in a Malaysian and a Southeast Asian context, it may be the case elsewhere. And clearly, companies which do have are strong in the sustainability and ESG front are more attractive for international investors. maybe it's because our markets are still quite small, are relatively small in the context of global markets, that that focus hasn't really, the spotlight hasn't really been placed on companies in our region yet. But again, I suspect it is going to be, it will follow. I think there are two major domestic institutions: Employees Provident Fund, which is one of the biggest provident funds in the world. They are definitely being very proactive, and I think they have a sustainability investment policy which they're going to roll out in the next month or two. I think that will be a critical enabler, I think, and maybe hopefully act as a catalyst for the rest of the industry.
For sure, I think that's a great call to action. So, not only just on the corporate side, such as yourself, but also bringing investors to the table, and that's something that we're working on with our colleagues in the regions to bring more sort of regional investors as well, for sure. But I think you're right. The drive from global investors is there, and that's also why we've engaged some of them, such as FIMCO on the Taskforce. But we'd love to kind of localize that as well. So we've talked about the role of investors, of banks. We've also talked about ESG, and you've mentioned sort of strong institutions as well in Malaysia that are pushing the agenda. How about the actual property and construction industry? What's your sense on that? What are your peers? How do you think they're doing in that space?
I mean, I think as an industry, the construction industry in particular is a very traditional industry. It's we operate in a VUCA environment. It's an industry with very low barriers to entry. It's very competitive, very low margins, and it doesn't have the greatest reputation internationally. It's an industry that's known for cutting corners sometimes, a lot of irresponsible players. So it's challenging. It is challenging. We are busy creating baselines across our business. We're trying to measure what our energy consumption is, and how much waste we produce, and obviously looking at our procurement policies, so that we can go to our suppliers and our supply chain and say, look, if you want to remain being a supplier to MRCB, these are some of the things you're going to have to address. I think there have been studies by the World Economic Forum suggesting that up to 40% of global emissions actually emanate from the property and construction industry. If you look at the totality of the supply chains that are involved in those industries, which are great. I mean, it's understandable why governments use the construction industry to pump prime economies, just because the multiplier effect that emanates from the industry is so big. But on the flip side as well, it's going to be quite important to address this with all of our supply chain, and we're beginning to conduct audits on our supply chain, and we will progressively start rolling out policies which they'll need to adhere to in order to pre-qualify for work with our business moving forward.
Yeah,
and I'm hoping that the industry will follow. I'm hoping the industry will also follow in our footsteps and do the same. I think the other thing we as a business are trying to do is we're looking increasingly at modular construction. We think modular construction is the way forward in Malaysia. It's not really adopted at all in Malaysia, although there are companies which supply international players in this space. But we think modular construction, we've launched a new modular construction system, which is proprietary to MRCB earlier this year, and increasingly we'll be using it for our residential developments. But basically what that means is it's a much more efficient method of construction. There's less waste. It'll reduce our dependence on foreign labor. It'll upskill the industry. It'll introduce way more efficiencies, both in terms of energy, materials, wastage. It'll speed up construction, which is important because obviously there are a lot of people that require housing, and there's a shortage of affordable housing in many parts of the world, not just Malaysia. So we're excited by this, but those are one of the direct steps we're taking as a business, to address this. And it's taken a long time. It's taken 2 or 3 years, three plus years actually, to keep forgetting about this year. It's such a
It's a
haze.
non-year. It's a non-year.
Yeah, 3 years, more than 3 years, in innovating to come up with this solution, and we're perfectly happy to license it to anybody, not just in Malaysia, but internationally. In fact, we have licensed it to a company in Singapore, which is building something at the moment, and also in Hong Kong. So we're very encouraged by the market's acceptance of this new technology, and particularly in quite robust and highly regulated construction markets like Singapore and Hong Kong.
Yeah, and that touches on so many other topics such as human rights as well, and many other aspects. So it's potentially a holistic sort of solution
Absolutely.
to a very complex problem.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know a bit more, and I'm sure everyone would as well at the conference today, hear a bit more about your other key sustainability focus area, sort of internal actions, and what else do you do in this space? What are your pillars? I'd be really interested to hear that.
I mean, I think the SDGs that I think there's 8 SDGs that we have adopted that go across the whole gambit. But obviously, the ones which are very particular to our business and our industry are SDG 13 on climate change, and we're busy, as I said, setting baselines and measuring our emissions at the moment, and then setting a roadmap moving forward of what our emission reductions will be over the next five years. I mean, obviously, as a business, we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. We have buy-in, very strong buy-in, aggressive buy-in from our board. We have set up a sustainability management committee within the organization, which is encompasses the key leaders across the organization, across all our divisions. So we've embarked on a big engagement exercise across the organization, which involved all staff across the organization, to make them understand the importance of sustainability and why we're embarking on this journey. We believe it's a journey. We don't think it's a means to an end. It's going to take. I don't think it's ever going to stop. So I think that's the way we view it, and we have plans in place, and we intend to address all the issues in our business. We intend to report on it very transparently. I think the governance aspect is very important as well. We publish a sustainability report already, but I mean, frankly, I think there's much more we can do, and that we intend to do much more. As I said, it is in a very nascent stage in Southeast Asia. It's definitely not mainstream. There's pockets of international investors that have investments in Malaysia in this space, but probably only on a passive basis. But in terms of people are reporting on their sustainability metrics and matrices in their businesses, but I think for many people it's just a box ticking exercise at this stage. And I think we need to take it away from being a box ticking exercise and make people really understand and open their eyes about how important this is. It's about doing the right thing, and it's making sure that the tone from the top is set, and making sure that the culture in the organization understands its importance and is driven towards really making a difference, and then making sure they understand what our targets are, and and make sure we report on them, and the good and the bad, to make sure that we all understand where we are, and and we know what we have to do.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant way, I think, to wrap this up and kind of highlight some of the key challenges that companies are facing globally, not just obviously in Malaysia or in the region. And that's also really why, you know, we've created this task force of CFOs to push on those issues. So we'll be looking at issues such as, you know, strategy, alignment, and reporting, and conversations with investors and financial
Yeah.
instruments that CFOs and people such
Yeah.
as yourself have
Yeah.
to push the SDG lens through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
any
think one of the,
final word
yeah, I
before
think,
we?
yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges we're having as an organization, I'm sure we're not the only ones, is that there are so many different bodies that we have to, you know, engage with, that are, you know, part of the process of measuring and reporting. You know, you have GRI, you have CDP, you have we're a FTSE for Good company, and the MSCI ESG index as well. And there seems to be no standard. I think there needs to be some sort of standardization, because in certain surveys we do quite well, and other surveys we don't do so well, and it's hard for us to really understand, you know, why that should be the case. You know, certain bodies attach higher weightage to certain areas compared to others, and I think it's very difficult for us to measure ourselves against other companies in that environment. And I think it just makes it very difficult. You know, I think if you really want people to sign on and report, then make it easier for them. You know, I think it's quite important, you know, especially for smaller markets and smaller economies like Malaysia, which probably perhaps don't have the depth that you have in Europe and the US, and where, you know, the resources are more limited, and the size of the companies are more limited. You know, it is quite challenging, you know, and I think that is something that it needs to be addressed, because, you know, it just makes things so much harder than they need to be, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jit, and that also resonates with all the investors that we work with, including PRI, you know, representing 2,000 different investors, and that's something that you know, as part of the task force, we really want to push through as well. So, having spent some time with CFOs over the last 9 months, what we've realized is that 40% of the time is around, you know, sort of integrated reporting and conversations with investors and so on. So,
Yeah.
so that's going to be a big focus, and we're looking forward to having your you know, thought leadership on those issues as part of the group. So you know, hopefully we can report back in a few months' time on progress. But for sure, alignment and homogenization of reporting and standards is going to be fundamental to achieve this.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Look
you so
forward to
much
it.
for your time, and
Hope to
welcome
add
to the
some
task
value.
force. Looking forward to
Thank
working
you.
with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jit.
Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.